Guys, we're here at Young and Jackson's, Melbourne's most iconic pub, opened in 1861, and since 1909, the famous painting Chloe has adorned the walls. It's too controversial for the art gallery back in the day, Jules, so she's lived here. We've got a bunch of Lions fans already in the building, excited for Saturday's game, but we have to go back to last Saturday in Brisbane, and what was a really disappointing performance and result for the Wallabies. Now that we've got a few days to have overlooked and thought about what went wrong, what are your thoughts?
I'm going to pick you up on one thing there. It was a disappointing result, but I think I've gone back and I've watched the game a second time, and I actually think there are some green shoots that emerged, and I think there's a little bit of positivity that they can take from it. But as we spoke about, the other thing is the Lions are going to improve as well. So 8 points was the margin, probably flattered the Wallabies, but I think it's going to be interesting this week.
I honestly think, based on what we saw last night from the First Nations and Pasifika team, that while they didn't play the A Lions side, there are some vulnerabilities in the tourists. They essentially showed the Wallabies how you've got to play these guys. Very confrontational, very physical, up in their face with a rush defence. Do you think we will see that from the Wallabies this weekend?
Mate, I hope so. I mean, rugby, people try to overcomplicate rugby and make it harder than it is. Like, one of the simplest and easiest ways, rugby's a game that rewards skill, but it also rewards courage. Just got to go out there and bash them. I mean, you've got to do it legally. You can't go the old biffo like they used to in the old days. But, mate, just hit people hard, and that's what they did last night. The First Nations Pasifika team. I mean, they're all big boys who are naturally physical as well, and they just went out and they bashed them in the scrums, they whacked them at the breakdown, and as I said after, I mean, these guys are human, right? When you get hit, it hurts and it's harder to get back up. Now the Wallabies, they were found wanting in the physical confrontation last week, mate. They love to talk about all the intricate moves and everything they can do. But they need to man up this week, and they need to take their cue from what they saw last night.
So, look, we're hearing that Bob Valentini and Will Skelton are going to be fit to play. If that is the case, massive ins for them. They're going to give them that real physical grunt, that presence that they need to go forward. I think that actually changes the dynamic. The
Absolutely.
other thing we've got to consider, Jules, is that it's predicted to rain quite heavily. So we've already had the Wallabies talking about how we'll have to have a tighter game plan. I actually think that brings Australia back into the contest a little bit, because the Lions have been the ones on this tour that have been playing with flair and have the quick counter-attack.
Yeah, I mean, where there's always the evener in contests like that, I do think it will help the Wallabies. I do think it will help their game plan. They're not as flash. The old days when the Wallabies played running rugby and scored tries from their behind their own line are long gone. I think it does help them. I think if you looked at their tactics last week and their kicking game and everything, I think they'll replicate that. The key thing's going to be how they sort of retrieve the ball in the air. I think they're pretty good last week. They had Tom Wright was solid without being spectacular. Tommy Liner went back and fielded a lot of the balls, so he was back there. Max Jorgensen was a threat all the time. It does open the possibility, though, of potential changes in the back line. Do you think they will happen? And what would you do if you were given the clipboard and put in charge?
Well, I read with interest your column in Code Sports talking about the backline changes that should be made. I tend to agree. They haven't given Joseph-Aukuso Sua'ali'i enough ball with space. Now, this guy is an absolute freak of an athlete. He's Australian rugby's $5 million man. You can't have him getting the ball and getting smothered on every single hit-up. He's got to have some space. I think he is suited to fullback. I think he's more dangerous, and the Wallabies' backline becomes more dangerous with him at fullback. I was really impressed with Tom Liner. I thought the courage he showed was tremendous in his starting debut. Really measured. Yes, he probably benefits from Tate McDermott, his Queensland Reds teammate, at scrum half. I don't think Joe Schmidt's going to go that route. I think, particularly with the rain that's predicted, he'll stick to the tried and true Jake Gordon. We're going to see a lot of box kicks, probably more than last week, which is going to frustrate the Wallabies fans, but you've got to play to the conditions in front of you. I think he'll stick solid there. I actually don't think he'll make any changes to the back line. In the forwards, yes. I think if Valentini's fit, he comes straight in, probably to replace Nick Champion de Crepney. And then I think if Skelton's fit, he's going to bring him off the bench for that added grunt. I think they probably have to start Angus Bell, as you alluded to in your column.
Yeah.
I mean, he was tremendous when he came on. They're just going to need that punch from right the first minute. I mean, they conceded a penalty after 19 seconds, Jules. They just can't afford to do that again at the MCG.
Yeah, sadly, I think you're right. Joe's shown himself to be a very conservative selector. In some ways, I kind of have a bit of empathy for him, because one of the complaints that Wallabies fans have had over the last 8 years is we just keep shuffling the team every game and reacting. And so people have been crying out for a sort of a pick and stick, and he's doing that, and so now we're bagging him for not making changes. But in saying that, like, you know, a lot of talk is, we're playing for the future and what's ahead. But mate, we need to work about what we're doing here and now. Lions tours are only once every 12 years. I'd hate to see Joe die on that hill without making some changes. I still think, although I'm not convinced he'll do it, I think he needs to make the changes, because you have a knock-on effect with the back line. So one of the things about playing Sua'ali'i at outside centre is that we don't have a natural inside centre playing at 12. So we've got Len Ikitau, who's the best outside centre in Australia. So you've got two guys essentially playing out of position there. So if you move Sua'ali'i back to fullback, which is his best position, then Ikitau comes into his preferred position, which is outside, then you bring in a specialist inside. But what I do think, if Joe Schmidt doesn't make changes to the personnel, I think he has to, and I think he will, bring people into the game earlier than he did last week. So, he kept Tate McDermott, out on a limb for way too long. He should have brought Tate on the moment the Lions scored straight after half-time and went 24-5. What are you waiting for, right? Yep. He's your best attacking player. Bring him on. So I think he'll do things like that. If he doesn't switch with Belly, he kept Slips on for...
almost till the 60th minute, which was incredible when the game is essentially gone. The other thing, I've got a bone to pick with the selections. What is doing with Lukan Salakaia-Loto? I mean, the guy has absolutely demolished the Lions 2 games in a row for the AUNZ team, and then last night for the Pasifika and First Nations team. He was outstanding. Now, he is exactly the type of guy that can disrupt the Lions and their will to physically impose and dominate the Wallabies team. I think he should be there. I doubt he's going to be there.
Nothing worse than the jilted lover, and he's been booted out of the team, and you can see it, in his face and the way he carries himself, he'd be one of the first guys I pick. I mean, he's fuming that he's not in the team, and I think that counts for something, because it shows how much he wants to be there. Certainly doesn't take it for granted, because he's not in there. He's great. I honestly think they made a big boo-boo by not bringing him in last week when they had Valentini unavailable. But as you say, mate, he was a bruiser last night, a big wrecking ball.
Jamie Pandaram here with Alfie Reynolds from TalkSport outside one of the most famous pubs, Young and Jackson in Melbourne. Now, look, the Lions, they're on their high horse. They're 1-0 up in the series, talking about 3-0. Got a bit of a scare last night, Alfie, against the First Nations and Pasifika team. Are you expecting any major surprises this week in selection, given the result last night?
Yeah, I think there's probably a few areas of the team that are going to be significant. Joe McCarthy might be out with an injury, so that's going to change Mara Toje's partner in the second row. I would imagine they'll do a straight swap, so Ollie Chessum will come off the bench and partner Toje in the second row. I don't think they will want to change the back row. There is a world in which you could put Ty Byrne into the second row and have someone else at 6, but Byrne and Curry would just unbelievable in the first test, so I think they'll keep the back row the same. So McCarthy possibly out with Chessum coming in. That then opens up some bench options for the Lions, because you'll essentially have Chessum, Byrne and Toje all starting. That's 3 second rows in your starting team. Does that open it up for Jack Morgan to be a bench option along with a Ben Earl or something in the team? I think that's probably the big one to keep an eye on. And then whether Mac Hansen's fit, it looks unlikely at the moment, so we don't know whether he's going to be involved. But certainly that second row, I think that's going to be the key area that we could see some change.
Well, we really saw McCarthy bring the aggression. We saw him go at Nick Champion de Crepney early, set the tone for that physicality. Do they lose a bit of that this time if he's ruled out?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, I really like Ollie Chessum. I think he's a brilliant player. I think he's growing in his club game with Leicester. He's been excellent for England when we've seen him recently as well. So I think Chessum's a really good player to have coming into the team. But McCarthy's been awesome on this tour. He's been so physical. He's brought a real edge, I think, to the Lions' play. So potentially for the Wallabies, they might look at that there. But, look, I know you and Julian have been speaking about the Wallabies. They just have to front up to this Lions pack better, don't they? Regardless of who the Lions Lions pick, they have to have more bite. They have to be nastier, because I thought they gave the Lions a bit of a free ride in that first test.
We're standing here, the rain's just coming down now.
Yeah.
We're expecting a lot more at the MCG on Saturday night. Your guys are used to rainy, wet conditions. Does that suit you, or does it actually counter what the Lions have been trying to do, which is play a really fast counter-attacking style?
Yeah, it's potentially a leveler, I think. I think we'll see a lot of kicking. If it is wet and rainy and it can become a bit of a scrap, then who knows? Maybe we'll see a match that is a little bit closer. I mean, I suppose ultimately, it for the Wallabies, it's matching the Lions' physicality. Like, they were miles off it in the first half an hour. Almost every carry the Lions had, they were making ground. They were bullying them. So I guess the weather could help with that, but it's more about where they are, I think, mentally, to be able to front up and deal with the Lions' physicality. But it could help for sure. What do you think? I mean, we're expecting kind of a fairly wet evening. That suits the Wallabies, do you think?
I think it suits the Wallabies for now, because they haven't got the combinations to play a really expansive game. They've got a new 5'8", starting 5'8" Tom Liner. Unfamiliar combinations in the midfield. If you're having a lot of rain, you're basically aiming for a more kick-oriented game, a more chase and pressure game. That actually brings the Wallabies back into the contest, in my opinion, because, as I say, the Lions on this tour have looked the more attacking, have the more attacking flair. I'm keen to get your thoughts on Owen Farrell. We saw him captain against the First Nations Pasifika team. He actually played really well. Now, if it is wet, does Andy Farrell have that temptation to name his son on the bench as cover, not only for the experience that he brings, but the tactical kicking that we know he possesses?
Yeah, this is such an interesting question. It's been bubbling along since Owen Farrell was called up to the tour. Now, on the one hand, Owen Farrell played his first 80 minutes in months against the First Nations and Pasifika. So you're looking at that and thinking it would be crazy to throw him into the test team 4 days later. But there's always been this possibility, I think, of Farrell being involved. And I think in particular, if you look at the final 20 minutes of the first test, yes, the Lions probably had the game wrapped up. They always had Australia at arm's length, but they lost control of it a little bit. Is that where you have someone like Owen Farrell, that is such an experienced campaigner, will drive the team on, tactically has such a good grip on the game, that will be able to see out those moments? Is that where you bring him in? I think there's a real possibility we see Owen Farrell. It would be a huge story. No one moves the needle like Owen Farrell back home in terms of discussion and reaction, and loads of people won't be happy about it. But I agree. I think he's looked great on this tour. I think he looked good last night. I thought he linked up really well with Gary Ringrose, who could come back in as well, returning from injury. So
He was excellent.
Yeah, I think there's a chance we see Owen Farrell. And also, it possibly changes your bench options as well. Because if you've got Owen Farrell, you probably don't necessarily need Marcus Smith. You could do something else with your backs replacements on the bench. So I think there's a chance of it for sure.
The last thing I want to get you on, mate, there was a lot of backlash around Farrell not picking a Welshman in the first test. You mentioned Jack Morgan before. What was the reaction like from back home that you know of around not having a Welshman in the side for the first time in 100 years?
Yeah.
And is Jack Morgan a realistic possibility, and what would that do not only for the team, but a lot of the travelling Welsh fans?
Yeah, well, if you read anything into it, Jack Morgan played, 50 minutes against the First Nations and Pasifika. So if you are looking potentially for him to feature in the test team at the weekend, he came off a little bit earlier. The reaction was massive, and a lot of it was from Welsh fans who were saying this is ridiculous. I don't think it was ridiculous Jack Morgan wasn't part of the first test. You've got Tom Curry, world-class operator, Ty Burn, world-class operator. Your bench option was Ben Earl, who just covers all places in the back row more than Jack Morgan. There was always going to be some quality players that missed out on this test team in the back row because the Lions are just so stacked. So I don't think it was ridiculous. It's a huge story. I mean, no nation in Britain and Ireland is as synonymous with the Lions as the Welsh. So to have no player in the test team for the first time in over 100 years is a big story. But I think he's right in the frame, particularly if, as we say, Chesham comes in and replaces McCarthy. You've got two back row options on the bench. I think there's a great chance we see Jack Morgan come in, and he'd have deserved it. He'd have absolutely deserved it. I think he's been great on the tour. He just hasn't been in the test team for the first test because they're spoilt for choice, essentially. So yeah, there's a chance he comes in.
Now, we know about the desperation of Australia to level the series. What do you make of the desperation of the Lions to be that first team to get 3-0 and a clean sweep?
Yeah, well, on the one hand, the Lions can only beat what's in front of them, and they haven't been particularly challenged in the tour games. It was awesome here at Marvel the other night because that was the best tour game we've had by an absolute mile. So they can only beat what's in front of them, and they're doing that, and credit to them. I don't think they can necessarily be the best touring Lions team we've ever seen, really. They've already lost to Argentina in Dublin. I know they're unbeaten so far out here in Australia, and I understand why it's motivation for them. I understand why they're talking that up, and I quite like the fact they're being quite punchy about it, which I suppose Australia, I think, should take as another insult, because there's no way they'd be talking about 3-0 if this was South Africa or New Zealand. Absolutely no chance. But they feel comfortable doing that because of where the Wallabies are at the moment. And you can understand it, can't you? I mean, based on the first test, they have a great shot at it. For me, they're still not going to be the greatest Lions team ever, because I think there's context here for the opposition they're up against. But it would be a hell of an achievement if they were to do it.
That's a sad reality for where Australian rugby is at, what you just said right there.
Yeah.
All right, guys, so we're heading into week 2, test 2 at the MCG. We're expecting 90,000 people. Most of them will be Lions fans. We know that. A lot of them behind us. So, are the Wallabies any chance, Julian, of turning this around, levelling the series to go into a decider in Sydney?
Yes, I think they are. History shows that in the 3 modern Lions tours, which resumed in 1989, that each series has gone to a decider. Now, I don't know whether that's because the team that's won the first game has got complacent, or whether the team that lost the first game has found something extra to motivate them and get them into it. And I think this will follow the same pattern. I think it's going to be a tight game. I think it'll be less than 5 points. But I think the Wallabies know they're playing for more than just themselves here. The future of the game needs this series to go to a decider. And I think they've got the motivation. I think if you see the way they finished the first match, the last 20 minutes, that should give them some confidence. And then I think they were given a blueprint from the Pacific and First Nations team on how to go about it. So, yes.
Alfie, the Lions have been talking the entire tour about 3-0. We want to be the greatest touring Lions team ever. Has anything swayed your thinking about whether they can achieve that goal, or are you expecting an even better performance from the Lions?
Well, I think the Lions will get better, which is the challenge for the Wallabies. I guess there's a couple of things from the Lions' point of view that has made this week tricky. First of all, having the game on Tuesday, I think undeniably that has been a bit of an inconvenience. I know a lot of the players that are going to play in the second test didn't feature on Tuesday, but nonetheless, it's still a game. You'd rather just be preparing for the second test. If it is going to be the weather we're potentially expecting with the rain coming in, is that a bit of a leveler and make it a real scrap? In which case, I think I agree with you that we're going to see a close game. I think the Lions will take a huge amount of encouragement, though, from that first test. I was really disappointed in the Wallabies. I spoke to Tate McDermott on the radio mic for TalkSport at the end of the game, and he said, we just weren't desperate enough. And I was thinking, how can you not be desperate enough for the first test of a Lions series that comes around once every 12 years? I get it that maybe the Wallabies aren't as good overall man for man as the Lions and aren't quite as good a team, but surely in terms of intensity and desperation, all that sort of stuff, I expected the Wallabies to have that. So last week I predicted that the Wallabies would get the win in the first test, and that was proven to be utterly wrong. And I guess it's a hope and a prayer, really, that they're able to produce something that is going to win this second test. I hope we go to a decider. My God, we need it to go to a decider, don't we? Because the tour games generally haven't been all that entertaining. The first test, I thought the Lions were way better than the Wallabies. So I hope it goes to a decider. Honestly, I'm struggling to see it.
I take what you're saying, and I agree that the Lions probably will get better, but I'm going to throw my favourite word in sport at you. Ambush. Backs to the wall, Australian teams. We've seen it time and again. We haven't seen it so much from the Wallabies in recent years, but with the desperation, with what's at stake, as you touched on, not just for this series, but for the growth and the sustainability of rugby in this country, needing a competitive Wallabies team, I think we see something completely unexpected and a complete wreckage of the Lions game plan. Touching on what we saw on Tuesday night with the Pasifika and First Nations team absolutely going the grunt and physically dismantling their opposition, turning it into a dogfight that they need and scraping away with a win to send it to Sydney to a decider.
Does this Wallabies team have that in them, though?
I think from what we saw at Twickenham last year, and you would have covered that game,
Yep.
They have the ability for these one-off amazing performances that catch everyone off guard.
Yep.
I think that's what you need. And Rob Valentini, if he's there, he's the key to that. He's the guy that gets the go forward. And if they can lay the platform, give Liner a bit of time, send some kicks up to put the Lions under pressure. I think we see some errors from them, and we can see one of the great boilovers at the MCG.
Yeah, stringing performances together has been their problem for a number of years now, but they've all, in the last, even how bleak this sort of last 5 or 6 years has been, they still pinched the odd game against the All Blacks and the odd game against South Africa. Terrific performance against England at Twickenham was like a 80-point game, they won. So I think it'll be one of those one-off games. I won't even make any predictions about the third test yet, but they will. I definitely think they're going to win one game in this series, and this is the one they have to win.
Well, listen, last time I predicted the Wallabies to win the first test, and you guys said the Lions, and you were correct. So, if we're true to form there, then we're going to have a level series, and we're going to be going to Sydney with an awesome test match. I hope you boys are right. Yeah, I just thought there were so many concerning things I thought about that Wallabies performance in the first test. They looked underprepared to me. I don't know if you guys felt, but in terms of they haven't released players for the tour games, they didn't seem prepared for the Lions' physicality, which again, I don't know how that can be the case. You know what is coming at you. And they looked a little bit soft, so I hope I'm totally wrong, but there's
still finished 3 tries each.
Yeah, it did.
The Lions didn't put them away.
Yeah, but the Lions had the game wrapped up 5 minutes into the second.
They completely took their foot off the gas when they knew that the result was theirs. The alternative, Alfie, is unthinkable. If we're going into Sydney at 2-0, we're basically riding an autopsy on this Wallabies team and going over old ground again, as Jules and I have done many times before, about what's wrong with Australian rugby, how can we fix it, and we never seem to find that fix. Absolutely vital that they get this win here.